Hello everyone, I'm Soma Mazumdar.
And I'm Orod Semsarzadeh, and welcome to Kanban Lab podcast. In each episode, we'll pick a common question and dive into a different aspect of Kanban, exploring its principles, practices, and applications, and answering that question.
Our goal in this podcast is to demystify Kanban and help listeners understand how it can benefit their teams and organizations through addressing the common misconceptions, clarifying concepts, and answering questions about Kanban. Morning, Orod.
Good morning, Soma. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Last night we had an earthquake in Melbourne.
Yeah, I heard about that. Hope everyone is okay.
We are okay. I don't know about everyone else. It wasn't a very big one. And interestingly, this is, I think, the second one in last couple of years.
Oh, wow.
All right. So how's everything in Sydney?
Well, it's still cold. That's what I can say.
Good. At least no earthquake.
No, no earthquake. Fingers crossed. But I really hope, like Melbourne is okay, no major damages. So all Sydney siders are praying for Melbourne at the moment.
Nah, we'll be fine.
Well, you haven't talked about the weather today. So let's do our weather section before we move on to Kanban. What do you think?
Weather is good. Sunny, a little bit chilly, but sunny.
Okay. Yeah, I think Sydney is also the same. But this week should be a little bit warmer for Sydney, which is a good thing, I believe.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Well, our weather section is done. So let's talk about Kanban. Tell me the new thing that you have heard about Kanban.
I think one of the most common thing I've heard about Kanban is as soon as you tell people Kanban, they say,
Mhm.
"Oh, we already Kanban." Have you heard about something like that?
Yes, definitely. And
So
I
where do you think
wonder,
that comes from?
yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking when you said that. Maybe now this is my hypothesis. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about Kanban, people often think it's the board, it's the visualization they are already using because whatever you do, you have some form of Kanban board with you.
Mm.
Like either it's like Scrum, Safe, any other framework, or even Waterfall. Like they will have some form of Kanban board to start with. So uh, interestingly, I actually had someone like a coach, and this is a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like very excited to get my trainer accreditation from like Kanban uni, so I was like telling that person that, hey, I'm gonna be a Kanban trainer. How cool is that?
Mm.
And that person who has been a coach for a long time told me, what's there to teach about Kanban? Aren't we all using Kanban? So this, and I was kind of like surprised to hear that, but then at the same time, I believe that people often take it like together, the Kanban board and then the Kanban management method,
Mm.
which requires you to create a pull system. If you
Yes.
do not have a pull system, you are not actually practicing the real Kanban. So that's the difference. What's your thought on that?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the question I always ask people, and in fact, last week I was in the last conference in Adelaide, and I
Hmm.
was running a workshop about Kanban, and one of the first things I ask people, what does Kanban mean to you, right?
Hmm.
And as you mentioned, almost everyone say Kanban is a board, right?
Yeah.
And but again, as you said, Kanban is not just a board. Of course, Kanban has a tools or user tools, which is a board to visualize the work and how the work goes through the system. But I like to step back a little bit and talk about the definition of Kanban, the terminology of Kanban, and then link it to the pull system that you mentioned. So Kanban has two meanings. So Kanban in Chinese means looking at the big board, right?
Yes.
And Kanban in Japanese means signal.
Yes.
And the Kanban we talk about influenced by the Japanese version. However, the Kanban that most people refer to, it's basically the Chinese version.
Chinese
Right?
version, yes.
So, as their point of view, Kanban is just a board. So it's a board with lots of cards, and you don't even know what's happening. There are lots of cards on the board, right? And I think David Anderson in his book said that this is not Kanban. It's just a wall with lots of cards. Right? But the Japanese version signal, and this is the Kanban we're talking about, right? So basically, when you look at the board, you need to see the signal that says, I have capacity, I'm available to start the next work.
Yes.
So I always tell people, those people who said we already Kanban, right? Say, okay, so when you look at your board, do you know who is available and has the capacity to start the work or not? If the board doesn't send you that signal, that means this is not a Kanban.
Yes.
Right? And the signal or this Kanban we're talking about, it's basically the WIP limit.
Yes.
So when we have less than our limit, then that means we have capacity and someone can start the next work or actually pull the next work. And that's how this pull system works.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And that's very important for creating a Kanban system, because if you do not have a pull system, if you are just using the board, there are some things missing, right? Like, because you wouldn't know what your capacity is at any given point of time. Also, it's not only the capacity, like you cannot have a proper conversation with your stakeholder when they just push work to your system, because you have no data, you have no way of convincing or telling them that why you cannot start a new piece of work, how's the capacity is like not reflected on the board. And creating a pull system is so important, because that also helps you to understand where the improvements can be made. How much work can you finish in a given point of time? Because you know that you look at the board and you get all the information from it. So you don't have to depend on each other to get that idea that, okay, hey, are you free? Are you free? Do you have capacity to do something new? So this is interesting. And one more thing that actually, like, I have had people made fun of me, like, other coaches, when I try to tell them that the Kanban with the small K, Kanban with a big K. There's a difference, right? Like, the big K is the management method, which incorporates everything, the visualization, the principles, the practices, the values, the pull system. But when we talk about the small K Kanban, that's just, like what you mentioned earlier, like the word in Japanese, the word in Chinese. So there's so much of difference when people do not get like which kind of Kanban are you doing, because both are valid.
To me, if your board doesn't send a signal, that's not even a Kanban board. It's just a board. There is a difference between normal board and the Kanban board. So Kanban board should have Kanban, and that's the signal.
Yes, the signal, the capacity. You can look at that. So if you remember the picture from the Blue Book of David J. Anderson, where he, like, there's a photo where 4 people are standing and a Kanban board is visible. So if you look at that board, you can actually have a meaningful conversation, and that's the essence of Kanban, right? By looking at the board, you can actually talk about improvement because everyone will be on the same page. When they look at the board, they visualize that what's happening. They can understand everything about demand, capacity, how each one of them are actually going. And then you can actually have a very good, meaningful conversation around that what can be improved, what can be done next. So I always refer back to that picture when
Yeah.
I'm, talking to people that, okay, because when you have that picture in front of you, you can come up with different ideas that, okay, what could have been happening?
That's right.
As far as I remember, the testing column was like overloaded in that picture. I could be wrong, it could be some other column, but what I wanted to say is that one column was overcrowded than the others. And that's where people need to have proper conversation around, like, the capacity, the pull signal, and everything. And yes, like if your board is not telling you all those, then it is not a Kanban board in real essence.
So the Kanban board should tell you the story about what's happening in that team or in that system, right? That's why we call them information radiator, because they radiate information. So you look at the board and you say, oh, these people, or we have some capacity here, or these works are blocked there, that kind of stuff. So we don't need to generate any type of report. We don't need to talk to people. The boards should tell us enough, or give us enough information about what's happening, where are the bottlenecks, that kind of thing, and then we can use those information to improve the system.
Yeah. There's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So recently I have done some Kanban workshop for a team. And so this team is very, very obsessed about vision and mission. And then I asked them, do you have a service catalog? Do you know what kind of services do you provide to your customer stakeholder? And then their answer were like, they were silent because they do not have a proper service catalog written. And this got me thinking. So when you are doing Kanban, you will be very, very confident about the services that you provide to your stakeholder. And this is another clue of that. If you are really doing Kanban, these are few steps that you need to align before you can say, yes, we are really practicing Kanban. So vision, mission can be very well tied with the service that you provide to your stakeholder customer. Are you aware of those services that you provide? Because if you do not know, then I would again go back and question, are you really practicing Kanban? Are you aware of like why Kanban even exists? Because the service delivery principle in Kanban, that is a very good way of getting people back to like, customer centricity. So what's your thought on that?
So just to make sure I'm clear, you run a workshop with a team, and then they said, we already Kanban, and then you ask them, who is your customer, what service you provide to the customer, and they couldn't answer that. Yeah.
Well, they don't Kanban at the moment. They want to, but they are.
That's different story. You are one step ahead. Most people, you say, okay, Kanban is out. We already Kanban. We don't even want to listen to you because we are already Kanban, right?
Yeah.
And as I say, you look at the board, millions of cards there. The cards been in development for like 300 days. And I asked them, is this actually been, in development for 300 days? Are you actually working? And they were like, oh, no, that's already fixed. We forgot to move the card, right? So they use the tools, but they don't effectively use it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So they just use it for, I don't know, maybe because they've heard something about it, or because just Jira provide, or, those ticket system. Maybe I shouldn't just call Jira, but anyway.
Any tool.
Yeah, any tools. Yeah, exactly. It just provided and give them this, feature to use it. And then very soon, most people don't even use that board, right? So they go to the daily meeting, daily sync, whatever, and they don't even look at that board, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they don't get the benefit. So,
Exactly.
the service delivery principles, all those kind of things that you mentioned, they're all valid,
Mm.
but they probably applicable to the people who actually using the board effectively a little bit.
Yes.
You know
Yes.
what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
talking about the people who say, okay, we already came and we don't even want to listen to you, you know, and it doesn't work or it works or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is actually quite interesting because I remember, I think a couple of years ago, I made a mistake, right?
Mm.
I started talking to a group of people,
Yeah.
and uh, I by mistake, and that was I learned that I learned a lesson. I said, Kanban, right? And they said, oh, we already Kanban, and
Mm.
I was like, okay, how can I introduce the actual Kanban to these people,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
These because when you know that you don't know about something, then you go and learn. But when you
Yes.
think that you know something, you don't even want to learn, right? And this is
Mm.
the biggest challenge I have with Kanban. Most people
Mm.
think they know Kanban, and most people, in fact, don't know Kanban.
Yeah.
So I, after that scenario, I basically learned it's better not to even mention Kanban, the terminology of Kanban,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And just ask them some question, right? So
Yeah.
similar question that you ask, who is your customer? Can you show me how the work goes through the system from beginning to the end, right?
Mm.
When do you know that you have capacity? When do you know there is a bottleneck? How do you track
Mm.
your work? How do you manage the work, right?
Mm.
How do you
Mm.
know this work needs to be started today to be delivered when the customer expected?
Exactly.
Those kind of
Yes.
things. And help them to think a little bit and then slowly
Mm.
suggested, some sort of solution, or maybe just ask them so they can think about it and
Mm.
find the solution themselves, and guide them to the right probably destination. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So one thing I would suggest to people who want to introduce Kanban to the people who said we already Kanban, we know Kanban,
Mm.
is not to even mention Kanban.
Kanban.
Don't
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
so
Kanban.
important.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just ask them some question. All
Yeah.
right, what do you think about this? How do you think we can improve this one? Those
Mm.
kind of stuff.
Mm.
And based on my experience, people accept it much more easier when you don't talk
Yes.
about Canva.
Oh, that's so true. I often actually ask about, so is your estimation working?
Uh-huh.
Because Kanban is all about making your system more and more predictable based on the data.
Well, that's the
So
goal, at least.
that's the goal,
Yes.
exactly. And especially if there is someone, who's a manager or like who's looking after a team and all they want is to deliver on time,
Mm.
when you ask them that, that gets their attention right away
Yeah.
because they want to really like want good estimates out of the team so that they can go talk to their stakeholder and tell them when the product will be delivered or the service will be delivered.
Mm.
So the moment I say that and I have their attention, then I like work on the next step. But yes, I totally agree, I never use the word Kanban.
Mm.
I do keep talking about the Kanban board because it's very important for people to understand that the board that they are using
Mm-hmm.
is what is it called. So and sometimes people like that, like just the terminology or the word, they will always associate, okay, I'm using a Kanban board. That
Yeah.
would be like
And do
really
they have
exciting.
Kanban on the board? Do they have the signal on the board?
No, no, this is what
Okay,
I'm
then it's not
saying.
a Kanban.
It is
Yeah.
not, but
Mm.
then again, like start where you are, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I try to do, because even though they say they are doing Kanban,
Mm-hmm.
but then the basic things are missing from there. But then when you go and try to tell them, it
Mm.
might attack their, like their current work practices. It might attack their identity in a way because they have associated them with like doing brilliant Kanban.
Mm,
So yes, like, and I always step back and I try to ask them some questions, and the estimation thing works because yes, making your system predictable or your deliveries predictable is
sure.
something everyone looks for.
Yeah.
And let's start from there. Like,
Mm,
fine, you want to
yeah.
make your deliveries more predictable, so why don't we start with that and see what can be done?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think in one of our episodes, we talk a little bit about estimation, but I think we need to talk properly about, how to be predictable with Kanban system
Mm,
separately.
yeah.
But, a lot of people, they like to estimate, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And and I never stop them. I always
Mm,
tell them that if you want to estimate, then estimate. That's fine. But historically, how accurate your estimation was,
mm,
right?
yes. Yeah.
Is this something you can rely on? Is this something that you can trust? Does your customer trust your estimation? And almost everyone said no. I was like, okay, if your estimation historically have been always too wrong,
Mm,
then what's the point of estimating it, right?
exactly.
But if you still think there is a value to estimate it, then
Mm,
sure, estimate it, do whatever you need to do. And then, I track
mm,
how long actually they spent
mm.
and what was their estimation initially. And then I show them, right? So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
60% off or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
because of all this time that the work was waiting or wasted
Mm,
or redo and this and unknown and all those kind of things that always happen at on knowledge works. So yeah, and then over time, they realize that, oh, okay, there is other way to be predictable, but we don't
mm.
have to estimate it. But yeah, if you want to estimate it, sure,
Well,
do it.
yeah, that's true.
All right.
So let's talk about the takeaway from today's session, because
Mm-hmm.
I think we are at time, and this is a good length talking about Kanban in teams when they are not actually Kanban.
Yeah, those who said we already can ban, we don't want to listen.
Well, I would still say just listen to this episode and see that, like
Mm,
where can you start, because it's never too late to start. So that's
that's right.
first thing.
So if I want to summarize what we discussed,
Mm,
I would say there is a difference between Kanban board and just a board with
mm,
lots of cards. So
yeah.
in your Kanban board, you need to see
Mm,
the bottlenecks, or Kanban board needs to tell you the story about what's happening
mm,
and show you when there is a capacity and we can pull the work.
yes.
Also, those who said we already Kanban, that's
Mm,
okay. Never mention Kanban, but you can ask them some questions
questions.
and help them to think about it.
Mm, yes.
And then over time, improve their board to become a Kanban board, and then eventually become,
Mm,
a Kanban system, which can balance between the demand, which is the number of works come to the system, and the capacity, which is basically how much work they can deliver to the customer.
yeah. And that's a goal, remember. So anyone who is in their basic version of Kanban, it's never too late. Start with limit wherever you think it is fitting at the moment or suitable to your working style. But start with it. Start small. You don't have to do a big bang change to your current ways of working.